Hello all, welcome back to the Time to Dice 1 Round Damage Challenge. Last time, we lost our temper a bit to determine how much damage the Barbarian could dish out when given the most ideal circumstances, and found that while the Barbarian is definitely a heavy hitter, it couldn't quite measure up to the Animus in terms of raw damage. And today, we're shifting the spotlight once again, this time to a Pathfinder class less known for damage, the Bard. On paper, the Bard is all about support and utility. They're the class everyone expects to help others deal damage, not steal the entire show themselves. But the Bard's time playing second fiddle is over. It's time to figure out what happens when we turn all that support inward. In this video, we're going to put on display the Bard's most potent performance tools, stack up its most aggressive buffs and spell options, and calculate exactly how much devastation one round of magically amplified showmanship can deliver. So warm up your vocal cords, tune your lute, and let's ask the question nobody expected to be asking today. Just how much damage can the Bard really do? There's only one way to find out, so without further ado, let's get started. So, before we start getting into how the build actually performs, let's get into the really important part of the video. How I think it will perform. The Bard is blessed with one of the widest toolkits in the entire game, and while they're definitely not known for being frontline bruisers, their chassis is packed with some of the most effective support options around. Also, it doesn't really matter how much power your chassis gives you if you get access to 10th rank spells and more unrestricted spell slots than anything else we've covered so far. So, maybe, just maybe, there'll be something within the occult spell list that'll make the Bard compete with the other classes, but I kind of doubt it. Alright, quick rules refresher for anyone new to the series. As always, we have one round to do as much damage to Bob as possible. During that round, any effect that involves a dice roll assumes the worst possible result for Bob. We get no equipment that isn't directly provided to us by our class, except for our weapons of choice, and those weapons are fully enchanted with maxed out potency runes to keep us on par with the baseline assumptions of the game. Finally, we're allowed as much setup time as we want, but once we actually damage Bob, our timer starts and we start the 1 round challenge. Okay, now for the actual build. Duskwalker Orc has kind of become our default choice for ancestry and heritage. Lifeblood's Call is just one of the most effective damage buffs in the game, giving us a boost of damage when we're wounded or doomed. We'll also grab Orc Ferocity and Rampaging Ferocity to squeeze out an extra reaction when we would be knocked unconscious. And we'll pick up Quieted Strikes for extra void damage on all of our weapon or unarmed strikes. This is a very small boost, but I'll risk spoiling a bit of the build to tell you that this will be the first time that we're going to use the increased damage for using a weapon with +3 potency rune, which will give us a small edge over the other classes. Our first major choice of this build will be what we choose to make our Muse. This selection will give us a level 1 feat and a bonus spell, neither of which will really make a difference to how our build works out, but the feats that those muses unlock down the line definitely will make an impact. Taking a look at these muses, we were able to quickly narrow it down to either the Maestro Muse or the Warrior Muse. The Warrior Muse gets Triumphant Inspiration, allowing us to cast composition cantrips as a free action whenever we score a critical hit, which we'll obviously be doing a lot, and Reflexive Courage, which basically gives us a reactive strike, letting us squeeze out more damage using our reaction. But the Maestro Muse gives us Eternal Composition for an extra action each turn that we can use to cast a composition cantrip. And Fortissimo Composition increases the status bonus that we get from Courageous Anthem to our damage rolls from +1 to +3. Once we looked into it a little further though, we found that the Bard is in fact a support class. So all of our composition spells are support and therefore don't do damage. And therefore wouldn't add to our damage total. And while the reactive strike is nice, we've already found a way to use our reaction to make a strike. So we're going to end up going with Maestro Muse for this build. It's at this point, I feel the need to remind you that Warrior Muse is probably more practical when trying to play a damage Bard. But this series has a way of throwing practicality out the window, so here we are. All in all, our Bard will get 10 class feat slots. Unfortunately, spellcasters don't tend to shine in the feat department, so we'll be turning to archetypes to fill most of these slots. We will make sure to grab the aforementioned Fortissimo Composition and Eternal Composition, as well as Quicken Casting, to help us squeeze out 2 actions worth of spell damage in 1 action. That leaves us with 7 more slots to fill, and for that, we'll turn to the Dual Weapon Warrior archetype. The dedication doesn't give us much except for Double Slice, which, while useful for cutting through resistance, doesn't do much for our purposes. Quick Draw will help us switch weapons without giving up actions. You wouldn't think this would be useful, but we found a way to make it work for this build, so stay with us. Twin Parry is exclusively used as a prerequisite for Twin Riposte, which lets us make a strike whenever a creature critically fails a strike against us, as long as we're benefiting from Twin Riposte. 2-Weapon Flurry lets us make 2 strikes with a single action, which is pretty obviously helpful, and then we pick up Improved Twin Riposte, which grants us an extra reaction each round that we can only use to Twin Riposte, and allows us to use that extra reaction even if we aren't benefiting from Twin Parry. This leaves us with one feat slot left. Leaving a single feat open is starting to feel like a tradition for this series, but luckily, not one that we'll have to continue on in this video, as we're going to build a slot with the Mauler dedication, to be able to apply the critical specialization of any strike we make with a two-handed weapon. That may seem like it doesn't fit for our dual wielding build that we've been crafting so far, but all will be explained later, just trust us. For our spells, a lot of these spells you'll probably recognize from our defined spell list builds, combined with some new options that are unique to occult casters, and some spells that make use of this build being the first to actually use a weapon. Our first meaningful spell comes in at 6th rank with Seal Fate. Then we go up to 7th rank where we get Inexhaustible Cynicism, Haste, and Echoing Weapon. 8th rank gives us Organ Sight, Warrior's Regret, and Bloodspray Curse. 9th rank gives us Summon Ancient Flesh Forged, Rope the Spirit, and Inevitable Disaster. And finally, 10th rank gives us Suspended Retribution. And with that, the build is complete, and with it, your last chance to put predictions for how well the Bard will do in the comments. But hey, while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? It really helps out the channel by telling YouTube that you like what you're seeing and would like to see more. We put out 2 videos a week, so if you don't want to miss anything, subscribing is really your best bet. Alright, shameless plugs out of the way, let's get back to the video. When we last left Bob, he was fighting for his life in the Colosseum. But, funny thing about that, Bob is undying. So, while he most definitely lost a fight against an unnamed barbarian, the to the death part of the combat proved a little hard to deliver on. The Colosseum kept Bob around for a little bit, but eventually, seeing a sentient punching bag get bloodied, failed to bring in the crowd, so the owners of the Colosseum quietly cut Bob loose back onto the streets. With nowhere to go, Bob wandered around, looking desperately for his next meal, when one night, as he was dumpster diving for valuables, Bob heard the most enchanting melody. With nothing else to do, he followed the melody into an alleyway, where he met our unnamed bard, playing a love song for a fair maiden and hopefully his soon-to-be fiancé. Bob felt his heartstrings moved, but in his respectful admiration for this bard's proposal, he accidentally stepped on a stray dog's tail, causing it to howl out in pain. The maiden, hearing this ruckus and assuming it to be part of the bard's performance, took the only reasonable course of action and immediately rejected the bard, storming off in rage at how poorly the bard had played. Bob attempted to apologize, but the bard, enraged by Bob's intrusion, attacked. For this combat, our setup isn't especially difficult. We essentially go down the list casting all of our spells, starting with longer duration ones like Seal Fate, Inexhaustible Cynicism, and Warrior's Regret first, so that other spells' durations do not expire before the setup is done. We also make sure to set Suspended Retribution to trigger if Bob makes more than one strike in a single round, and selecting Piercing as our Seal Fate weakness. On our last round of setup, we'll cast Summon Ancient Flesh Forged to summon the Bone Breaker. This will immediately activate the Bone Breaker's skull-breaking hum ability, but since that just enfeebles targets rather than actually dealing damage, that's fine for us. We'll also get the hastened action from Eternal Composition to cast Courageous Atheism, boosted by Fortissimo Composition. On our next round, we'll start the timer. We'll open combat by holding a pick in each hand. For our first action, we use 2-Weapon Flurry to make a strike with each pick. Of course, both of these strikes crit and roll max damage to deal 104 damage, plus 6 from Courageous Anthem, plus 16 from Lifeblood's Call, and plus 4 from Quietest Strikes. Both of these attacks will also provoke Weakness 3 from Seal Fate, which won't double, and inflict an additional 108 points of damage from Organ Sight. Finally, Bloodspray Curse gets added on top for 24 more damage. But because that's technically different damage roll, we get to add another 3 from Courageous Anthem, and another 3 from Seal Fate, bringing our total to 407 damage with our first action. From there, we'll use 2 free actions to drop our pick, and Quick Draw to draw and strike with a Great Pick with a single action. Also, I should mention here that the Great Pick is what we use the Echoing Weapon on, rather than either of the picks that we were using initially. Also remember that thanks to the Mauler dedication, we get to apply this pick's critical specialization effect, which will bring our total damage with this strike up to 159. With our third action, we'll be casting Rip the Spirit. Quicken, of course, so that we can use the 2-action version for 1 action, totaling up to 216 more damage, plus 6 more from Courageous Anthem for a total of 222 more damage. Finally, we have our 4th and final action thanks to the Quicken condition from Haste. Another swing with our Great Pick puts another 159 damage on the board, and it's the end of our turn, but not quite the end of our damage, because in a twist of fate, someone inside one of the buildings nearby was throwing out a chandelier. They threw it outside their window, attempting to sink it into a nearby dumpster, but instead landing the shot directly onto Bob's head, dealing 210 points of piercing damage, plus 3 from Seal Fate. And our good pal the Bonebreaker departs, using his bruising departure ability on the way out for 192 more bludgeoning damage. And before we forget, that's 2 more damage rolls, so 6 more damage from our Courageous Anthem. And finally, our Great Pick explodes with Sonic Energy, dealing 8 more damage from Echoing Weapon, thanks to the 2 strikes that we made with our Great Pick during our turn. All in all, our turn ends having done a whopping of 1,372 damage. But wait, we're not done yet. Bob is fed up with life giving him so much abuse, and is going to strike back, using all 4 of his actions to attempt to strike us. And luckily, he's going to hit. And even more luckily, that one hit is enough to knock us unconscious. But of course, I mean lucky for us, because that strike will trigger our Orc Ferocity and allow us to use Rampaging Ferocity for an extra strike with our Great Pick for another 153 damage. You might notice that we've lost the 6 extra points from Courageous Anthem as its duration expired at the end of our turn. But that does mean we're only on 1 hit point, so Bob tries to push his luck by making another strike against us. Of course, this will trigger Suspended Retribution, dealing 220 more mental damage, and even worse, Bob seems to have used up all of his luck, as he critically fails his strike, triggering our improvised Twin Riposte feat. Remember, we don't have to be benefiting from Twin Parry to use this extra reaction. In fact, there isn't even a requirement that we must be wielding 2 weapons, so our Great Pick is completely fair game. 153 more damage onto the board. For Bob's 3rd and 4th strikes, it doesn't really matter if he hits us, but he doesn't. And he triggers Suspended Retribution twice more, for a total of 440 more damage. Bob's turn comes to an end, and Regret kicks in. Warrior's Regret, that is, dealing 24 more mental damage, and 24 persistent bleed damage from Bloodspray Curse, and 36 damage from Inexhaustible Cynicism, bringing the round to an end, and bringing our damage total to a grand total of 2,422 points of damage in 1 round. That puts our Bard pretty firmly in 3rd place of all the classes we've covered so far. Which sounds great until you remember we've only covered 3 classes so far. The Bard clocks in at a measly 4.4 Tarrasque slain in a single round. Does this mean the Bard is a bad class? Well, of course not. First of all, the idea that you're using this series as a way to gauge how good a class is almost laughable. But also, newsflash, the Bard is a support class. The very idea that you can pump a Bard's damage up to the point that it's almost 90% of a Barbarian's is incredible. And remember, we've done all of this while keeping our 1st through 5th rank spells completely open for whatever else you would want to do. Think about it. Barbarian does significantly more damage, but that's all it can do. So while this result might be disappointing for our purposes, it also makes complete sense, and is well in line with the balance of the game. But that's all we've got for you today. If you liked this video, make sure to let us know by hitting that like button, and subscribing to the channel. We're having a blast making these videos, and we really hope y'all are having just as much fun enjoying them. But that's all we've got for now. Until next time, keep rolling high, and we'll catch you in the next one.